The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Eleanor Grayson sat on the edge of the stiff bed, her trembling fingers tracing the edges of the medical report. At 70, her silver hair still held a faint shimmer of the auburn it once was. But her eyes, once bright with laughter, now carried the weight of a truth she couldn't unlearn: stage 4 breast cancer. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Clinical, yet devastating. We'll do what we can. But you should prepare. Prepare. As if one could prepare for the unraveling of a life. She glanced at the empty chair beside her. Harold, her husband of 45 years, should have been there, his hand steadying hers as it had through decades of joys and storms. But he wasn't. He hadn't been since that morning 2 weeks ago when she'd told him the diagnosis. His face had paled, his lips tightening into a thin line before he muttered something about needing air and walked out. He hadn't returned. Not to their modest home in Willow Creek. Not to her calls. Not to the hospital. The man who'd vowed to stand by her in sickness and in health had vanished when the sickness became real. Eleanor's chest tightened. Not from the cancer, but from the betrayal. She'd spent days replaying their life together, summers by the lake, winters curled up by the fireplace, the way he'd hum off-key while cooking breakfast. Had it all been a lie? Or had the specter of her illness exposed a cowardice she'd never seen in him? She didn't know which hurt more. The nurse, a kind woman named Clara, poked her head in. Mrs. Grayson, do you need anything before I go off shift? Her voice was gentle, but Eleanor caught the pity in her eyes. No, thank you, Clara, Eleanor said, forcing a smile. I'm fine. A lie, but one she'd perfected over the years. Clara nodded and left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Alone again, Eleanor's gaze fell to the folder on her lap, not the medical report, but another document she'd requested from their lawyer last week. The life insurance policy. She and Harold had taken it out 20 years ago. A practical decision for a couple with no children, meant to ensure the survivor's comfort. Harold was still the beneficiary. Or he had been. Until yesterday. Her fingers brushed the revised document. The ink still fresh where she'd changed the beneficiary to Willow Creek's community Centera place that had been her sanctuary, where she'd taught knitting classes, organized fundraisers, and found purpose in her later years. Harold didn't know. He didn't deserve to know. Not after abandoning her when she needed him most. The decision hadn't been easy. It wasn't about spite, though the sting of his absence fueled her resolve. It was about legacy. Eleanor had spent her life giving quietly. Without fanfare, and she wouldn't let her final act be tainted by a man who'd chosen himself over her. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text from her neighbor. Mrs. Delaney saw Harold at the diner with a suitcase. Said he's leaving town. You okay? Eleanor's heart thudded. Leaving town. Without a word. She typed back a brief "I'm fine. Thank you," and set the phone down, her hands shaking. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. She closed her eyes and pictured the community center, the creaky wooden floors, the laughter of children at the after-school program, the warmth of shared stories. That was where her money would go. That was where she'd leave her mark. But the hurt lingered, sharp and unrelenting. She thought of confronting Harold, of demanding answers. But what good would it do? He'd made his choice, and she'd made hers. As night fell, Eleanor lay back on the hospital bed, the hum of machines her only company. She didn't sleep, but she dreamed off a life where love didn't falter, where promises held. And somewhere in that dream, she found the strength to face what came next. The morning sun filtered through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes across Eleanor's face. She hadn't slept. Not really, just drifted in and out of restless thoughts. each one circling back to Harold. 45 years. How do you erase that? She pushed the question away, focusing instead on the present. Today was her first chemotherapy session, and she'd face it alone. Clara returned, her smile a little brighter than the day before. Ready, Mrs. Grayson? She asked, adjusting the force stand. As I'll ever be, Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the churn in her stomach. She wasn't just talking about the chemo. She was ready to reclaim her life, piece by piece, without Harold. The treatment room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of sterile equipment. Eleanor settled into the recliner. The needles pinch a minor sting compared to the ache in her chest. As the drip began, she closed her eyes, letting her mind wander to better days when Harold's laughter filled their home, when they danced in the kitchen to old jazz records. But those memories now felt like borrowed moments, belonging to someone else. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Lily, the young director of the community center. Eleanor, we miss you. The kids made get-well cards. Can I drop them off? A warmth spread through Eleanor's chest. She typed back, I'd love that. This afternoon. Lily's reply was instant. See you at 2. The promise of those cards, scribbled with crayon and hope, carried Eleanor through the nausea of the morning. By the time Lily arrived, her arms full of colorful envelopes, Eleanor felt a spark of something she hadn't in weeks: purpose. These are from the kids, Lily said, her brown eyes bright with kindness. At 30, she was all energy and optimism, her curly hair barely contained in a messy bun. They keep asking when you'll be back to teach them knitting. Eleanor smiled, flipping through the cards. 1. From a girl named Mia. Read. You're the strongest person I know. Miss Eleanor. Her throat tightened. I'll be back soon, she said, more to herself than to Lily. They talked for an hour about the center, the kids, the fundraiser Eleanor had been planning before her diagnosis. Lily didn't mention Harold, and Eleanor was grateful. The center was her refuge, a place where she was more than a sick woman abandoned by her husband. It was where she belonged. As Lily left, Eleanor's thoughts turned to the insurance policy again. She'd made the right choice, hadn't she? The center would use the money to expand the after-school program, maybe even build a new art room. It would outlive her, a legacy of love in a world that had shown her so little lately. But doubt crept in. What if Harold came back? What if he apologized, begged for forgiveness? Would she waver? She shook her head, banishing the thought. He'd left her to face this alone. That was the truth she'd carry. The chemo left her drained, her body heavy as she returned to her room. Another text awaited, this one from Mrs. Delaney. Harold's car is gone from the house. Heard he's staying at a motel out by the highway. Eleanor stared at the words, her anger flaring. A motel? He couldn't even face her to say goodbye. She opened the insurance document again, rereading the beneficiary change. It was final, notarized. Harold would get nothing. The thought brought a bitter satisfaction, but also a pang of loss. This wasn't how she'd imagined their story ending. That night, as the hospital quieted, Eleanor pulled out a notebook from her bag. She began to write not to Harold, but to herself. A letter to the woman she'd been, the woman she was becoming. You are enough, she wrote. You always were. The words blurred as tears fell, but they were tears of resolve, not despair. Weeks passed, each day blurring into the next under the haze of chemotherapy. Eleanor's body weakened, her hair thinning to wisps, but her spirit hardened, tempered by the fire of survival. The hospital became her temporary home, its routines familiar, almost comforting. Clara and the other nurses were her anchors. Their small kindness, fresh coffee, a warm blanket stitching together the frayed edges of her days. The community center remained her lifeline. Lily visited twice a week, bringing updates and more cards from the kids. One afternoon, she brought Mia, the 9-year-old who'd called Eleanor the strongest person she knew. Mia's dark braids bounced as she handed Eleanor a knitted scarf, lumpy, uneven, but made with care. "I used what you taught me," Mia said shyly. Eleanor's heart swelled. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." She draped the scarf around her shoulders, ignoring the ache in her bones. For a moment, she wasn't a patient, but a teacher, a friend, a woman who still had something to give. Lily lingered after Mia left, her expression hesitant. "Eleanor, I heard something about Harold." She paused, gauging Eleanor's reaction. "He's been telling people at the diner you're fine and that he's just taking a break." A break. The words cut deeper than Eleanor expected. "A break from what?" she said, her voice sharp. "From me. From our life." She laughed, a bitter sound. "He's not coming back, Lily. I know that now." Lily reached for her hand. "You don't deserve this. You're stronger than he'll ever be." Eleanor squeezed her hand, grateful but weary. Strength was a heavy mantle to wear alone. That night, she dreamed of Harold, not the man who'd left, but the one who'd proposed to her under a willow tree, his eyes full of promises. She woke with tears on her cheeks, the dream a cruel reminder of what was lost. The next day, a lawyer named Mr. Thompson visited. He was a wiry man in his 50s, his suit slightly rumpled but his demeanor kind. "Mrs. Grayson, I need to confirm the beneficiary change," he said, sliding papers across the hospital tray. "You're certain about the community center?" Eleanor nodded. "Absolutely." She signed the final forms, her signature steady. "Harold doesn't need it. The center does." Mr. Thompson hesitated. "I don't mean to pry, but I saw Harold yesterday. He asked about the policy. Said he was worried about financial strain." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Financial strain. Was that his excuse? She forced a calm tone. "He's not my concern anymore. Thank you, Mr. Thompson." After he left, Eleanor's mind churned. Harold was sniffing around the policy, oblivious to her decision. Part of her wanted him to know, to see the consequences of his betrayal. But another part, the part that still loved the man he'd been, wanted to shield him from the truth, if only to preserve her own dignity. She wrote in her notebook again that night, her words fiercer now. "I am not defined by his choices. I am defined by mine." The act of writing grounded her, each word a brick in the foundation of her new life. By the end of the week, Eleanor received a call from Mrs. Delaney. "Eleanor, Harold's back in town. He's at the house. Says he wants to talk." Her heart lurched. Talk? After weeks of silence. She wanted to scream, to tell him to stay away. But curiosity and perhaps a flicker of hope stopped her. "Tell him I'm at the hospital," she said finally. "If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me." She hung up, her hands trembling. The thought of seeing Harold again was a storm she wasn't sure she could weather. But she'd face him, if only to prove she could. Harold didn't come that day, or the next. Eleanor waited, her emotions swinging between relief and disappointment. By the third day, she'd stopped looking at the door every time footsteps echoed in the hall. She told herself it didn't matter. She had her treatment, her visitors, her purpose. But the silence from Harold was a wound that refused to heal. Clara noticed the change in her. You seem quieter today, Mrs. Grayson, she said, checking Eleanor's chart. Everything okay? Eleanor hesitated, then spoke. My husband. He said he wanted to talk, but he hasn't shown up. I don't know why I expected different. Clara sat beside her, her eyes soft. People show you who they are when things get hard. You're seeing him clearly now. That's a gift, even if it hurts. Eleanor nodded, the words sinking in. A gift. She wasn't sure she wanted it, but she couldn't deny its truth. She turned her focus to the community center, planning the fundraiser from her hospital bed. Lily had sent her a list of needs: new books, art supplies, a renovated playground. Eleanor sketched ideas in her notebook, her mind alive with possibility. It was easier to focus on others than on her own pain. A week later, Harold finally appeared. He stood in the doorway, his familiar frame stooped, his gray hair unkempt. He looked older, diminished, nothing like the man who'd once carried her over the threshold of their first home. Eleanor's heart thudded, but she kept her face composed. Eleanor, he said, his voice rough. I needed time. He gestured vaguely at the hospital room. It's a lot. She stared at him, her voice steady. It's a lot for me too, Harold. But I'm still here. He shifted, avoiding her gaze. I didn't mean to leave like that. I just panicked. I'm back now. We can figure this out. Figure this out. As if her cancer were a puzzle to solve together. Anger flared, but she kept it in check. What do you want, Harold? He hesitated, then sat in the chair beside her. I heard you've been talking to the lawyer about the insurance policy. I thought we should discuss it. You know, for our future. Our future. The words were a slap. She saw it now. His return wasn't about her, but about money. The policy. The one he didn't know she'd changed. Her hands clenched the blanket, but her voice remained calm. There's nothing to discuss. I've handled it. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. Handled it? What does that mean? It means I made a decision, she said, meeting his gaze. For me. For what matters. Harold leaned forward, his voice low. Eleanor, that policy is for us. For me. If you, he stopped. But the words hung in the air. If you die? She felt a cold clarity. You left, Harold. You don't get to claim us now. He stood, his face reddening. You're being irrational. This is our security. No, she said, her voice rising for the first time. It's my life, and I choose how it ends. He stared at her, then turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. Eleanor exhaled, her body trembling. She'd faced him, and she'd held her ground. It was a victory, small but vital. That night, she wrote in her notebook, I am not his anymore. I am mine. The words felt like a vow, one she'd keep no matter what came next. The days after Harold's visit were a blur of treatments and reflection. Eleanor felt lighter, as if confronting him had loosened a knot in her soul. She didn't expect to see him again, and she told herself she didn't care. Her focus shifted fully to the community center, where her legacy would live on. Lily brought more good news. The fundraiser was gaining traction, with local businesses donating supplies and volunteers signing up. You're the heart of this, Eleanor, Lily said during one visit, her eyes shining. The kids talk about you all the time. Eleanor smiled, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. They give me more than I give them, she said. She handed Lily a list of ideas for the fundraiser craft fair, a bake sale, A talent show featuring the kids. Let's make it big, she said. Something the town will remember. Lily nodded, scribbling notes. You're incredible. You know that. Most people would. She trailed off. But Eleanor knew what she meant. Most people would crumble. But Eleanor wasn't most people. Her health, however, was declining. The chemo was taking its toll. Nausea, weakness, a fog that clouded her thoughts. Clara noticed and adjusted her care, slipping her extra blankets and sneaking in her favorite lemon cookies. You're a fighter, Clara said one evening, her voice firm. Don't forget that. Eleanor clung to those words, especially on the harder days. She began writing letters to the kids at the center, one for each child in her knitting class. She told them stories of her own childhood, shared lessons she'd learned, and urged them to be kind, to be brave. It was her way of staying with them, even if her body failed her. One afternoon, Mr. Thompson called. Mrs. Grayson, I've had a call from Harold's lawyer. He's contesting the beneficiary change. Claims he wasn't properly informed. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Can he do that? It's unlikely he'll succeed, Mr. Thompson said. The change was legal, notarized. But he's trying to make trouble. I'll handle it. She thanked him, but unease settled in her chest. Harold's persistence wasn't about love, it was about control, about claiming what he thought was his. She wondered how she'd ever loved a man so small. That night, she wrote in her notebook, he can fight for the money, but he'll never take my choice. The act of writing steadied her, a reminder that she was still in control, even as her body weakened. Lily visited the next day, bringing a surprise, a video from the kids, each one holding up a sign with messages like "We love you, Miss Eleanor, and you're our hero." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she watched, her heart full. This was why she'd changed the beneficiary. This was her purpose. As the fundraiser approached, Eleanor pushed herself to stay involved, even from her hospital bed. She reviewed plans, suggested themes, and even designed a logo for the event, a willow tree, like the one where Harold had proposed all those years ago. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about reclaiming her story. By the end of the week, Eleanor felt a shift. Her body was frail, but her spirit was fierce. She was ready for the fundraiser, ready to see her community come together. And if Harold showed up to make trouble, she'd face him again, not as his wife, but as Eleanor Grayson, a woman who chose her own ending. The fundraiser was set for a crisp Saturday morning, and though Eleanor couldn't attend in person, Lily promised to livestream it. Eleanor spent the days leading up to it in a flurry of excitement. Her hospital room transformed into a command center of sorts. She reviewed schedules, approved decorations, and even recorded a short video message for the event. Her voice steady despite her frailty. "You're the heart of Willow Creek," she told the camera, her eyes bright. "Thank you for giving me a reason to keep going." Clara helped her set up a tablet to watch the stream, propping it on the bedside table. As the event began, Eleanor's heart swelled. The community center's lawn was alive with color booths selling handmade crafts, children running with balloons, a stage where Mia and her friends performed a clumsy but heartfelt dance. Lily's voice came through the speakers, thanking everyone for their support and dedicating the day to Eleanor. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes, but they were tears of joy. This was her legacy, unfolding before her. She'd given everything to this moment, and it was worth it. Halfway through the stream, Lily texted, "Harold's here. He's asking to speak at the event. What should I do?" Eleanor's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected this, but she wasn't surprised. Harold always had a knack for showing up when he sensed an audience. She typed back, "Let him speak. But don't let him mention the insurance." Lily's reply was swift, "Got it. I'll keep him in check." When Harold took the stage, Eleanor braced herself. He looked out of place in his pressed shirt, his smile too polished for the raw emotion of the day. "I'm here to honor my wife," he began, his voice carrying a practiced sincerity. "Eleanor's always been the heart of this community, and I'm proud to stand by her." Eleanor's jaw clenched. Proud. Stand by her. The lies stung, but she kept watching. The crowd applauded politely, but she saw Lily's tense expression in the background. Harold went on, talking about their life together, painting a picture of devotion that made Eleanor's stomach churn. He didn't mention the insurance, but his presence felt like a claim away to rewrite the narrative. When he finished, Lily took the microphone, her voice firm. "Eleanor's strength is why we're here today. Let's keep this about her and the kids." The crowd cheered, and Harold's smile faltered. He left the stage quickly, disappearing into the crowd. Eleanor exhaled, her anger tempered by relief. Lily had protected her, and the event went on, a celebration of everything she'd fought for. By the end, they'd raised enough to fund the after-school program for a year, with promises of more donations to come. That night, Clara sat with her, watching the final moments of the stream. "You did that," Clara said, squeezing her hand. "You made this happen." Eleanor smiled, her body exhausted but her heart full. "We did it," she corrected. "All of us." She wrote in her notebook before bed, "Today was mine, not his." The words were a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. Harold could try to reclaim their story, but she'd already rewritten it. As she drifted to sleep, she thought of the kids, the center, the future she'd helped build. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the one she'd chosen. And that was enough. The fundraiser's success lingered in Eleanor's heart, a beacon through the darker days that followed. Her health continued to decline, the cancer spreading despite the chemo. The doctors were honest now, months, not years. Eleanor accepted it with a calm she hadn't expected. She'd made her peace, not with death, but with her life, on her terms. Lily kept her updated on the community center's progress. The funds were already at work. New books lined the shelves. Art supplies filled the craft room, and the playground's renovation was underway. Mia and the other kids sent videos, showing off their latest knitting projects. Eleanor watched them on repeat, her laughter mingling with tears. But Harold's shadow loomed. "Mr. Thompson called again, his voice tense. "Harold's lawyer is pushing harder. They're claiming emotional distress, saying you changed the beneficiary out of spite. It's a weak case, but it could drag things out." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Let it drag," she said. "He won't win." She hung up, her resolve firm. Harold's fight was about money, not love. She wouldn't let him taint her final act. Clara noticed her tension and sat with her, bringing tea instead of coffee. "You're carrying too much," she said gently. "Talk to me." Eleanor hesitated, then let it spill the hurt, the anger, the love she still felt for the man Harold used to be. Clara listened, her presence a quiet strength. "You're allowed to grieve him," she said, "but don't let him steal your peace." The words stayed with Eleanor. She wrote in her notebook that night, "I grieve the man I loved, but I won't let him define me." It was a release, a letting go of the past she couldn't change. A week later, Lily arrived with news. "Harold's been talking to the local paper. Says he's been misunderstood, that he's trying to protect your legacy. He's planning a public statement." Eleanor's blood ran cold. A public statement. He was turning her pain into a spectacle. Let him talk, she said, her voice steady. The truth speaks louder. Lily nodded, but her worry was clear. I'll keep an eye on him. The town's on your side. Eleanor. They know who you are. The support buoyed her, but the thought of Harold's manipulation gnawed at her. She decided to act. She recorded another video. This one for the town. I've given my heart to Willow Creek, she said, her voice clear despite her weakness. The community center is my legacy. Not because of money, but because of love. Thank you for standing with me. Lily promised to share it at the next town meeting. The video spread quickly, shared across social media and local news. Messages poured to neighbors, friends, even strangers, all offering love and support. Eleanor read them through tears, her heart full. She'd built something real, something lasting. Harold's statement came a day later, a rambling defense of his absence, claiming he'd needed time to process. The town's response was tepid, their loyalty firmly with Eleanor. She didn't gloat, but she felt a quiet triumph. Her truth had won. That night, she wrote, I am enough. My choices are enough. The words were her armor, her shield against whatever Harold might try next. She was ready to face the end, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd claimed her story. Eleanor's final weeks were a tapestry of pain and peace. The cancer had spread to her bones, each movement a reminder of her body's betrayal. Yet her spirit remained unbroken, fueled by the love of her community and the legacy she'd secured. The hospital room, once sterile and cold, was now filled with color cards from the kids, flowers from neighbors, a quilt from the knitting class, draped over her bed like a hug. Lily visited daily, bringing stories of the community center's transformation. The playground was nearly complete, a bright space where children laughed and played. We're naming it Eleanor's Haven, Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. It's official. Eleanor's eyes welled up. You don't know what that means to me, she whispered. She pictured the kids running through the playground, their joy a testament to her life's work. It was enough. More than enough. Harold made one last appearance, unannounced, his face haggard. He stood in the doorway, clutching a bouquet of wilting roses. Eleanor, he began, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I want to make this right. She looked at him, seeing not the man she'd loved, but a stranger consumed by regret too late. You can't make this right, Harold, she said softly. But I forgive you. For my sake, not yours. He flinched, as if her forgiveness was a weight he couldn't bear. The insurance. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. She interrupted, her voice firm. It's done. The community center is the beneficiary. It's where it belongs. He stared at her, then nodded, his shoulders slumping. I loved you, Eleanor. I still do. She didn't respond. Love wasn't words. It was action, and he'd failed that test. He left quietly, the roses forgotten on the chair. She didn't watch him go. That night, she wrote her final entry. I forgive him, but I choose me. My life, my love, my legacy, they are mine. She closed the notebook, her heart at peace. The end came gently, in the early hours of a quiet morning. Clara was there, holding her hand, whispering words of comfort. Eleanor's last thoughts were of the community center, of Mia's lumpy scarf, of the willow tree that had once held her dreams. She smiled, and then she was gone. The town mourned her, but they celebrated her too. Eleanor's Haven opened a month later, filled with laughter and light. The insurance money arrived, funding scholarships, art programs, and a library in her name. Harold didn't contest it again. He left Willow Creek for good, a footnote in a story that wasn't his. Lily kept Eleanor's notebook, reading it to the kids on quiet afternoons. Her words lived on, teaching them to be kind, to be brave, to choose themselves. And in every laugh that echoed through Eleanor's haven, her legacy threaded a testament to a woman who, even in her darkest days, chose love over bitterness, purpose over pain,